I started recording and the workshop is going to start in about 2 minutes. Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and begin so we can be on time. Others may show up a little bit later. That's okay. I'm Kanika Smith. I go by Kay. My degree is in instructional technology, and with us here is obviously Dr. Landau, and she is the director of the SELF department. So what I'm going to do today is, well, first, if you could just come away with one thing you've learned today, that'll be great. So don't feel pressured to take any notes or anything like that. Just sit back and relax, because a lot of this information we're going to have available for everyone in the BlazeVIEW 101 course shell. Okay, so before we begin, I do have something for you. It's a poll. Okay, and if you see it on your screen there, it says, which of the following is an evidence-based practice for asynchronous online discussions? And I'd just like to evaluate what you may know about the subject and just choose the best answer. And I'll give you a moment to finalize your answer. All right. It seems like everyone has answered, so we're going to, let me record. Yes, we're going to at the end. Okay. So by the end of this webinar, you will be able to describe the benefits of evidence-based practices for online discussions, differentiate asynchronous and synchronous online discussion activities to implement in your own course now or in the spring, and apply one new innovative activity to elevate online discussions in a course. And lastly, demonstrate reflections on teaching and sharing of experiences with peer faculty. And we have Dr. Landau here, so we will definitely be able to do that as well. Okay, and as instructors for online courses, many times instructors will start to understand that there are levels of engagement, and depending on the technology alone can be a mistake. So you might wonder, how can you elevate elevate current practices. And why is it beneficial? Well, the community of inquiry framework can be very useful as an approach to designing online discussion-based activities. The core of COI is its collaborative, constructivist approach to teaching and learning, and it's based on facilitating deep, meaningful learning. The framework has 3 interdependent structural elements. As you can see, social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And social presence, it provides community. And according to VSU and state and national surveys, engagement is a top concern among students and faculty. And a social presence also means a safe space for shared knowledge. And the term you might have recognized in the poll, fisheye teaching, it is when in face-to-face classes an instructor only calls on the extroverted students. Similar to looking at a poll that only provides a limited view. So fisheye teaching can be avoided if social presence is emphasized in designing discussions. And a safe space typically allows shy students to participate. Research also shown that social presence increases learning performance. By teaching, we learn, which is a good segue to cognitive presence. In cognitive presence, we want to encourage higher order thinking. And based on Bloom's taxonomy, these categories will help develop higher order thinking questions that could lead to conversations in the on course. Well-written discussion questions ask students to utilize higher order thinking skills, which are demonstrated in the uppermost tiers of Bloom's taxonomy here, with application, analysis, and evaluation. And the Academy of Art University actually provides a clear understanding on the different types of questions based on Bloom's taxonomy with keywords and examples. I've included this resource in the reference page at the end of the slides. Another great resource listed on the reference page is information on the pair approach. And last but not least, the COI element of teaching presence provides necessary facilitation of the learning process through effective discussion. And online, this is best achieved by first stating student expectations. And transparency with adults is very important. Setting clear expectations about requirements, steps, deadlines, and grading procedures. And it helps students understand the relevance of what they're expected to do, which also aids student motivation. When it comes to online teaching, it's nearly impossible to over-explain student expectations. Another facet of teaching presence is reflecting on the purpose of the online discussion and ensuring that it aligns with learning objectives, your teaching style, and the needs of the students. Also, when monitoring, instructors can see what students are thinking and strategically redirect the discussion with clarifications, examples, or additional resources if needed. And the research by authors in the Online Journal of Educational Technology found that problems arise when instructors are either too dominant or too absent in discussions. And then students actually became more involved in online discussions when the facilitator participated as a guide and provided balanced feedback and encouragement. Many people have wrongfully concluded that online course design means set it and forget it. As we've seen in the research and the community of inquiry framework, effective teachers' presence is a necessary component in the learning process. Okay, and before we go into the strategies, we're going to briefly discuss how to differentiate between the two terms. As asynchronous discussions, it's typically in the form of discussion boards. It's generally a student-centered teaching method, and it's a delayed mode of communication, meaning there's an increased time for in-depth reflection of subject matter and cognitive participation, which also allows for the students to develop the deep critical thinking skills. Asynchronous discussion board activities are actually low-tech and inclusive for not only shy students, but for those who have limited internet access, as it typically does not require downloading large files or high gigabyte consumption. Gigabyte or discussion board activity do not typically require advanced technology skills or tools, as the discussion platform is built into BlazeVIEW, campus-wide LMS available to both students and instructors. And this will be the main mode of engagement that we're going to be considering today. And whereas in synchronous discussions, they're typically in the form of video conference sessions. That will be Blackboard Collaborate Ultra for us at VSU. And it is real-time communication that supports personal participation, which means providing immediate feedback. Students can ask questions and get answers in real time as the session is proceeding. And hello, Professor Thomas has joined us. And the instructor can gauge the student's understanding in real time and adjust the session accordingly. And there's also this visible teaching presence. It strengthens social presence and it's encouraging an exchange of multiple perspectives. It enhances dynamic interactions among the participants, and it fosters the exchange of emotional supports. But as you can see, there are many positive features of asynchronous discussions, which is why it's the answer to many of the major concerns students and faculty have when it comes to online courses. Even though we will mostly focus on these asynchronous strategies today, synchronous discussions have merit, and we will briefly list these techniques as well. Okay, so let's say a course has an introductory discussion activity where the instructor models what a proper post would look like. There's a FAQ thread for students to post questions, a student lounge thread, and graded discussion activities with higher order thinking prompts. That really sounds good. But how do we elevate asynchronous discussions to be more engaging and effective? Well, listed on the next few slides are a few innovative yet evidence-based strategies. And on this slide, we have listed some higher and lower prep methods for asynchronous sessions. First is debate or role play strategy, self-grading and group grading with rubrics. And, well, it's actually more than you, it's 7. For lower prep, it's strategically scheduling discussions by staggering deadlines, one for initial post and one for replies, and using the discussion board as a presentation space with galleries, diagrams, and even voice threads. And then there's creating small discussion groups, posing opening and closing discussion prompts, and requiring students to self-label to align with your grading rubric. Now, and we will give examples of all of these on the next few slides. And then one great method here is to consider debate/role play, where the instructor assigns or students choose a particular viewpoint on a topic. Students post their viewpoint supported by research. And yes, Danielle, these slides will be available, and they'll also be available through BlazeVIEW 101. And once the students post these, they'll wait for a response from a peer with a different viewpoint and then reply with a rebuttal. In some cases, students write a final reflection on what viewpoint they agree with. And then, or they can also discuss what other information might be necessary before they can decide. This is a fun yet engaging way to motivate students to craft good arguments and hone their presentation skills, which are necessary for most adults beyond college. Additionally, it's recommended to post an etiquette statement as well as a schedule for the debate, and ask students to write their role at the top of the post to remind everyone that students are just playing a role. And you may know there are some examples on these slides, and this is for your reference. When you receive the slides via the BlazeVIEW 101 course, that will be explained in the email that will be sent to you later. And it will also be included in the activity that we will do in a few minutes. All right, and the next one here is strategic scheduling. In some cases, you may find that the students will actively participate in the discussion periodically throughout the week on their own. where other classes, we may have nearly all the students post and reply on the due date, which obviously does not allow for deep reflective thinking essential for effective learning. So to avoid the dreaded post and run, a helpful strategy would be to stagger the deadlines. Have one for initial post and other for replies. Next is self-grading. Here, another innovative method faculty can employ is self-grading or group grading. Adult learners, their engagement in self-grading speaks to andragogy, a theory about how adults learn. Discussing self-grading engages the adult learner in active reflection, some introspection, and even evaluation of their own performance. The goals of discussion with self-grading in the online course are ultimately improved discussion performance and enhanced learning. This article will examine discussion self-grading as a theoretically sound, innovative, yet simple grading method educators can employ to encourage adult learners to evaluate their own performance. Further, this slide here can explain methods for using the quizzing tool in conjunction with the discussion grading rubric to implement this innovation. Another highly effective strategy here is assessing synchronous discussions. Reflecting on the purpose and ensuring that it aligns with learning objectives, your teaching styles, and the needs of the students, you can ask yourself different things as an instructor, like what are the desired skills, knowledge, or perspectives that the students are to gain from the discussion, which will make it easier to design a rubric. And a rubric will help the students understand expectations, plus significantly lighten the load on the grading process. Okay, and then for the discussion board as a presentation space. This is yet another method to use. Students can share their files or links to media content they have created. Then the next week, the students can apply to a minimum number of peer presentations. Students might record a simple video of themselves presenting on an assigned topic, or they might post a link to a voiced-over visual presentation, such as a slide deck or a selection of images. They might be asked to create and post a graph or other visual, and then a video or audio recording of themselves explaining it. And this kind of post can also be used for students to introduce themselves to each other at the beginning of the term. And having students review and analyze their own video recordings is an effective means of fostering reflection. And all of these methods are available through BlazeVIEW. Okay. And then there's small groups. And with this, you can create smaller discussion groups within the forum. This can be arranged randomly, in pairs, or in groups of 3 to 5. Each group is assigned a topic, a prompt, maybe a case study, and then the group can then collab within their forum. And once they've completed, a group leader can then post the work in the main forum for the whole class to view. Then by a different due date, the students will post a specified number of replies in the thread of their choosing. The following 5 slides here are about 2 of the strategies VSU faculty have used. And the first is posing, opening, and closing discussion prompts. And the second is requiring students to self-label. Dr. Landau, would you like to elaborate on those last 2 points, posing, opening, and closing discussion prompts and requiring students to self-label?
Sure. Hold on one second, though. I was just saying that I think another creative thing about the discussion groups, and I just want to point out for everyone here, is because a lot of faculty tell me, oh, yeah, I put students in discussion groups, but the last 2 points you have here is really key, that you appoint a discussion leader. Again, it's almost like a role play, almost combining the other strategy, and then that you have students respond to different group discussions. So I just think those are really key to point out here too as well, okay? But yes, okay, I'll go on to strategy number 6. So strategy number 6 is what's called opening and closing discussion prompts. So a lot of faculty do discussions based on like the content area, like the topic that they want students to learn. So like maybe in like a literature class, Danielle, like I don't know which class you're teaching, you may be teaching comp, but let's say you're teaching literature class and you're teaching them about Beowulf. You know, you may have a discussion prompt normally about like, you know, the overarching narrative of Beowulf. Well, that's good, but actually the research says one way to elevate is to actually ask students more about their learning, not just about their content. And so, for instance, that's what this strategy is about. It's about posing and closing prompts. So at the beginning of the unit, so let's say at the beginning of when they first learned or first reading the book on Beowulf, you had as the discussion prompt for that week, even before they start reading the book, ask them what do they think they already know about Beowulf, about that genre of literature. And the research shows this is what's called a precognitive predictive strategy. It triggers your brain to think about what you might already know about a topic. And then when you teach the students the topic, they're more likely to remember it and kind of almost be like, oh, yeah, I was right, or oh, no, I wasn't right, but I learned this. So this is based in the science of research. It's called a precognitive predictive learning activity. So again, you pose a question at the beginning of the unit that asks students what they think they already know about whatever it is they're going to learn. And then similarly, let's say now you spend a couple weeks talking about Beowulf, and then at the very end of the unit, instead of again just asking them, well, what was the thesis or the takeaway of what was this author arguing, instead you would ask them again a learning question, a closing learning question. So you pose to them, what do I know now that I did not know before? So the students then have to do the deeper, higher orders of thinking of, oh, what did I learn? Like what was the thesis of the book? What did I not predict that now happened? And then I learned based on these literary concepts that my professor taught me. So I like these strategies because, again, they push, like Kay said, to the higher orders of critical thinking, of not just regurgitating content. And they're more inquisitive discussion prompts that you could use. So then I'll move to the last discussion strategy, which is, again, kind of building on a little bit of what Kay already talked about, students grading with their grading their discussion. But this is almost like a baby step towards the grading of the discussion post. This is called when students self-label their discussion posts. And I got this idea from reading some research on discussions. And what I have, and this is an example actually from my syllabus, where I have students, they have to self-label their discussion posts with these 3 Qs. So what that means is a compliment, a comment, a connection, and a question. And so this little paragraph here is what I explain to them on the syllabus. I say, I'm trying to teach them good kind of discussion etiquette, going back to what Kay said about netiquette. Too often our students just kind of like phone it in, or get really vitriolic, especially in like chats or more interactive, like we see that with online discussions, right? Like in the world, they're not very civil. So I'm trying to teach them that when you reply to someone, when you're dialoguing with someone, you want to compliment them, you want to affirm them, and then introduce your ideas, even if they disagree. So I have students say they have to always start with a compliment, right? Compliment the other peer that they're responding to, or even the author that they're reading. And the students at first think it's funny. They're like, what? I have to compliment the author? And I'm like, yes, you know, they're a living, breathing, or at some point were. So, and then they have to label that in their discussion post. They have to label it as compliment. And then the comment, you're going to notice these kind of go into Bloom's orders of thinking. The comment is more like asking the students to have that one takeaway. What was the main thesis of the reading? What was the big lesson that you learned from this reading? But being very specific. Connection starts to go up the higher orders of thinking. So now that's making them apply it to their life, or apply it to another course they're learning, or a concept that we learned earlier in the semester. So, and then question, right, has them push the conversation further, right? Counter the author maybe with a question that that pushes again, doesn't just regurgitate the learning. And so students actually self-label this when they post online. And so now I'm going to click and show you some examples from my BlazeVIEW class this semester. And we've, Kay has, you know, oranged out the names of the students. And this is actually a pretty long one, I'll have to say. I mean, literally, they just did this a couple weeks ago. But notice, see, in the top corner, see how the student has said compliment. And then they compliment the book, the reading, the 2 books they're reading. Then in their comment, they start to kind of narrow in on the concepts, the citing from the literature that they're reading, the book that they're reading. And then the connect, right, the student starts talking about how she did this activity that the author talked about doing, which helped her grasp this idea of, they're reading a book called Sticky Ideas, like how to make your ideas persuasive in this communication course. And then question, right? See, she says, can someone explain to me what the curse of knowledge means, like what this idea is? So I really, you know, too often our students post and they do it like Kay said, they just do it to get it over with and move on. But by really asking them to pose a question in this context, they're continuing the conversation with their peers. And so I'll show you then the replies. So then on the next page here, we had one of my students reply, right? And so this student says, I really enjoyed reading so-and-so's experience as she tried the exercise, right? So we make it feels like an actual dialogue and like an affirmative space. Then the student goes on and narrows down, though, this more key concept that they were learning about prioritization and getting to the core and simplicity of your ideas. So this student was able to get more at the you know, again, the more refined content of what they were reading. And then the connection, we see the student starts making a connection to Disney and how they work for an organization, right? And how this idea connects to their life. And then similarly poses a question. And the students don't always have to answer each other's questions. But then this was the following student who replied. So this student said, I really enjoyed this person's and this person's experience. It helped me grasp this idea, comment, connect, and question. And so I share this because similar to Kay's example of having students self-grade, so they're not self-grading. They're not actually like ranking themselves here, but it's the rubric. Like this is my rubric pretty much. I grade them on compliment, comment, connect, and question. So when I grade, it's much quicker because I can go right to the paragraphs, and they're almost reflecting and articulating the very parts of the rubric where I'm gonna, you know, give them certain points. But it also pushes them to these higher orders of thinking and makes the discussion much more elevated than the typical just reply to your peers or things like that. It kind of makes it much more of a holistic, genuine conversation like we might have in a face-to-face class. So I think, Kay, I think we're right. We're now ready. I'm ready to turn it back over to you because that was the end for the last strategy.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yes, those are really engaging strategies. And we're going to briefly go over some of the synchronous online discussion via video conference strategies here. And the resource links are provided in the slide out you will be receiving in the BlazeVIEW 101 course shell. And if you want to know more information about each, you just click under each. And synchronous discussions can be a wonderful way to connect and motivate students. However, there are a couple of cautions to consider. One is that teaching experts advise against live lecture if it's not necessary. Knowing students can't manage long meetings or they need strong internet, they may share a computer along with many other potential hindrances, is best to use precious interactive time to avoid lectures and instead breakout sessions so that students can with one another. Also, to increase inclusivity for students who cannot attend for technological reasons or otherwise, instructors are also urged to provide a link to the recorded sessions or to allow students to choose which ones to attend amongst multiple opportunities to join sessions throughout the semester. Okay, now going in, we have some icebreakers. These can promote social presence in an online course. which is what students experience when they feel connected to their students and their instructors and also TAs. It's a fun way to set the stage for instructors to model engagement in the course as well. If you're considering synchronous discussions, I really recommend checking out. They can also, some of them, be used for asynchronous discussion. A flipped classroom is where students first explore new course content outside of the class by viewing pre-recorded lecture video or digital module or completing a reading or preparatory assignment. And then in-class time is organized around student engagement. Students can ask questions, they can grapple with and apply some difficult concepts, and in-class sessions typically entail some collaborative coursework and use active learning strategies, including things like case studies, problem sets, or some kind of structured discussion. And then instructors can also assess student understanding via polls and the whiteboard, and then a note catcher like Google Docs that you'll see later on, or in the chat window. Also, we have Jigsaw. It's a cooperative learning strategy that's been used for decades for face-to-face instruction. However, it can be used in video conferencing, where each student becomes an expert on a given topic and systematically rotates to different groups and share this information with peer groups. A clear explanation on this method is presented by Jennifer Gonzalez of Cultural Pedagogy, and the link is provided here. All right, and then small groups is where instructors use breakout rooms. And here again, you see this word note catchers like Google Docs, so students can collaborate with one another and the instructor can view what the students are thinking. And then there's think, there's share, thoughts, questions, epiphanies, or TQEs. And then lastly, fishbowl is where only one group presents while the rest of the class observes, they take notes, or and then they reflect and respond by asking Socratic questions. Okay, and then when we design discussion activities to be fun, interactive, no matter the strategy, we will first, hopefully we will remember to use prompts that are encouraging the deeper level thinking with words based off those higher categories of Bloom's taxonomy and the pair method. And then also aligning those discussion prompts with learning objectives, our teaching style, and learner needs. And then essentially all the students need to do is come to class with a willing attitude, and you'll have active discussion boards that increase shared knowledge and engagement. And now to allow you all to apply one new effective or innovative activity to elevate online discussions in a course and demonstrate reflections on teaching and sharing of these experiences with your peer faculty, Dr. Landau is going to help assign everyone to a particular strategy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're not going to do the breakout groups. We don't have big enough groups. So you want to go ahead and put the link in the chat, and then.
Sure. And then I'm going to share this Google Doc via a link in the chat.
No, Blair, we're going to do active learning here, no homework. Okay, so if everyone can click on the Google Doc, right, we are going to practice what we preach. We do not just lecture to y'all, right? We're going to have a live discussion. So if you can click on the Google Doc and open it up, and you don't need to be looking at me on the other screen for now. So if everyone looks at the Google Doc, so what we have here is Kay has broken down now the 7 asynchronous discussion activities that we just learned, right? Debate role play, strategic scheduling, self-grading, group grading with rubric, discussion board, presentation space, small groups, opening, closing prompts, and self-label. And the reason they're hyperlinked is you can either click on that link or look, scroll down the Google Doc and you'll see the slides that go with each of the strategies, okay? So we're almost giving you not homework, but the cheat sheet, right? For what each of these strategies are. So Now what we'd like each of you to do individually is I'm going to assign each of you to two, actually, you know what, since we have a small group, I'm going to ask you guys to pick two strategies that you want to work on. We're going to make sure you guys pick different ones. And what you'll do, so let's say Danielle chooses Cliff Notes. Let's say Danielle chooses debate role play. Then what she's going to do for about 10 minutes is she's going to type in that box, right? She's going to specify her class. So she's going to think of a class that she's teaching right now. Maybe it's English 101, whatever it's called. And she'll type that, and then she'll explain how she's going to implement this strategy of debate role play in the asynchronous online discussion boards in that box. Okay, literally type in this box. And then she'll move to the right and think, predict and problem solve any issues that might come up with how she would be implementing this, right? So the typical student who resists and refuses to, speak up, right? So how are you gonna, encourage that student in an asynchronous context? So similarly, both of you are gonna, this is a collaborative note-taking, and we're going to use this to kind of frame your application of what you learned today, and then have a discussion about it at the end of the webinar. So, so Danielle, are there two particular activities that strategies that you would like to focus on for now?
It really doesn't matter to me. I don't mind doing the debate, like you had the first one that you were just talking about. I can do that one, and it really doesn't matter the other one.
Okay, so why don't you just do debate, role play, and then how about you do self-grading, group grading with rubric too?
Okay, perfect.
And then Blair, are there any else on the list here that you would like to try and focus on? You might be muted. I can't hear you. Or you could write in the chat if you want. Okay, so Blair, how about you do opening and closing prompts and small groups? Okay. Sound good? So go ahead now, and both of you start typing in the box. Kay says we'll have about 10 minutes, so we'll be working till about 2:45. And Kay and I will try to jump in and add some other examples if we could think of from our classes too. And if you have a question, go ahead and just unmute yourself or ask us that question. We're kind of all working individually, but we're still here collectively to help you. And remember, if you need a refresher of the strategy, scroll down. You'll see the slide to give you a refresher of how you might need to apply it to your class. By the way, feel free to make these boxes, like keep writing. Don't worry that the doc will get kind of longer. Just keep writing. That's okay. That's what's great about Google Docs.
Right, so I have a quick question. So for the self-grading, group grading, what the students that they're grading themselves on, does it have to be in the discussion, or are we talking about a completely different assignment and then they go to the discussion to grade themselves and reflect back onto an assignment?
That's a great question. Kay, what did the research say on that? That's actually very interesting. I'm not sure. Kay did more of the reading on that. How would you answer that, Kay?
Yes, one of the articles used two different approaches. One was where the students completed an assignment and then they graded themselves based off of the assignment in the discussion. So basically they have to justify why they thought that they deserved which grade based off of the rubric. Then another method would be for the students to post or reply to a prompt and then respond via a quiz, or they can do a separate assignment answering whether or not they did the discussion prompt according to the rubric. This acclimates students to using the rubric. So basically, you would be thinking of what kind of things you would have in your rubric. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So what I'm thinking about is I just had the students do peer reviews. Actually, I broke them up in groups, in discussion groups. I used the group feature for the first time, and so I was thinking about to grade them on their peer review, posing the rubric and having them grade themselves. I mean, is that what we're talking about here? Does that work for this?
Yes, absolutely. That's great. Yes. When the students grade themselves, that's a way that they can reflect and then also discuss what kinds of things that they came up with during their reflection.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Kay.
All right, we have about 4 minutes left, just as a reminder. Or actually now 3 minutes left. Okay, we have about 1 more minute.
Since we have a small group K2, you could wait another minute or two just so people finish their boxes if you want. It looks like Blair's almost done, you know, so we could wait probably another extra minute or two.
Okay.
And if you have finished, like Danielle, go ahead and just read through everyone's examples, so you get a kind of feeling for the different examples on the Google Doc. The same with you too, Blair, as you finish up. Take a quick scan of what some other people wrote.
Okay, that's really good work, everyone. Well, as you may or may not have gathered, some of these strategies are used in conjunction with others. For instance, we may want to use staggered deadlines and rubrics. And in the meantime, you can leave the collaborative Google Doc up for a few minutes and go ahead and download it. Dr. Landau, do you mind explaining how to download and save the Google Doc, please?
Sure. Yeah, sure. And I apologize, y'all. I was clicking the slide yet and Kay wasn't ready for that yet. Okay, so before we move on, we want to make sure everyone downloads this. And Kay will actually also include it in the materials she'll upload. But if you are looking at your Google Doc and you go at the top and it says File, scroll down in File, and then you'll see the link that says Download. And then go over and pick your format. If you want it in Microsoft Word or PDF, those would be one of the two I would say. So go ahead and go to File, Download, and then do Microsoft Word or PDF and save that on your computer for now. Because you will return to this even after the webinar. Of course, we wanted to make sure that you guys had it even before we proceed in talking through it. So if you could just let us know in the chat, if like just say done once you're done, that would be helpful. And then we'll move to the next step. Done. Perfect. Thank you, Danielle. Perfect. Thanks, guys. Okay.
All right. Well, once again, great job applying all the strategies that we went over today. And if you could take a moment to look at the Google Doc, yes, and reflect over what we've discussed in the webinar today, and then fill in the blank to at least one prompt below. Please, you can answer out loud or type in the chat.
And actually, since we have a small group, answering out loud I think would be really great. So pick 1, 2, 3, or 4 and share with us your thoughts, and we can talk through the Google Doc and some of the strategies as you answer. So Danielle, you want to start?
Sure. The main takeaway for me today is to not look at discussion so, one-dimensional, that there's so many different things you can do with the discussion. So, and there are a couple of them that I already do, the strategic scheduling. I think there was something else, but I am interested in the self-grading, the two actually that I picked. So I am interested in trying to incorporate those into my course and my future course. So it was great.
Okay, you want to respond to that?
Those are really good points. Yes, the ability for the students to self-reflect is really important, especially for their ownership of their own education. So those are really good takeaways that you have.
And I bet, Danielle, I know why you're drawn to that strategy, because it'll reduce your grading load. And
that's a bonus. So that's a bonus.
Yep. But it's, we definitely knew that some faculty were already using some of these strategies, and that was why we even had number 4 here about, you said you already had staggered deadlines, so that was great. Is there another online discussion activity that you want to share with Blair and us that you've used? If not, you can say no, but you just had mentioned you had been using some of these before.
I use the discussion as a presentation space. I actually used it in conjunction with VoiceThread. I didn't consider using the discussion board as the actual presentation space, but I did have them upload videos or pictures into the discussion board for the introduction, for the icebreaker. But I also used VoiceThread in conjunction with that. So I was trying to involve as many different ways as I could. So
that's great.
It worked well, so.
That's great. We didn't even want to bring that up. I know Kay kind of mentioned it, I think, on the early slide, because we weren't sure if all faculty were familiar with VoiceThread. Blair, I don't know, VoiceThread is an external learning tool that we pay for and embedded into BlazeVIEW, and it's like a much more video multimedia version of the discussion board. So that's what Danielle is saying. It's kind of taking the BlazeVIEW functionality to the next step. Great. So Blair, what about you? Which 1, 2, 3, 4? You want to answer a couple of these questions and share?
Yeah, is the audio working now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Sweet. All right. It only took us leave it to a guy to take like an hour to figure it out. Yeah. So for me, first on VoiceThread, I am aware of it because I did the intro to teaching this summer.
Awesome. You did the online course. Yeah.
The month long, so that thing was like emphasized on our modules, every module. So, but yeah, so one thing that encouraged me to think about was, like Danielle, I have used samples of all these, like features of all these over the years teaching, but my biggest concern was how can I pull these off in a class of 125 compared to like 20. And now, based on application and kind of getting ideas from, you three, I can better navigate these strategies now, like applying smaller groups into these big classes. That's a big one. Because I find myself saying 125 times, that's interesting, great point. I'd love seeing the fly on Mike Pence's head too. And I just kind of feel like my feedback can now be better if I infuse certain strategies like small groups and I think that's key. So I appreciate
Yes.
that point.
Yeah, so you put up a great example of taking, like Kay said, a couple of these strategies. So your challenge is these large, super sections now that are online, but even we already have some faculty who teach fully online, I know in your program all the time. And so break them into small groups and then even have them do self-grading.
There
right?
you go.
There you
Like
go.
Danielle, I got better things to do than do discussion board posts.
And so that's more manageable, and it's not even just, it's like Hayes said, the research shows that helps the students learn, right? It points them more to what they need to do to get a higher grade and what's a higher order thinking kind of post. Yeah, that's great. That's a big challenge. I guess who had the small groups? Well, you had the small groups in your, if we look at the Google Doc layer, so you didn't, is the poli-sci 1101, is that the big class? Is that the like 100 and some odd person class?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's because I'm the guy that teaches online exclusively now. So at least for now. So my classes went from like 30 to 125 as a result.
Yeah.
So this timing could not have been better. Us talking.
Good. Oh, that's wonderful to hear. That's great to hear. Well, Kay, I don't know if you want to say anything in addition in response to Blair, and then I know you have another final activity to do.
Yes, I actually appreciate his comment. It allows us to understand how these different strategies can benefit actual courses at VSU. And those are really wonderful takeaways. So yes, before we end the session, I think, Professor Thomas, that you had missed the poll in the beginning, but you'll get a chance to look at it here because I'm going to pull it up for us again. And it helps us to understand not who, but what you've been able to gather during this workshop. So if you can take a moment and answer the poll, it says, which of the following is an evidence-based practice for asynchronous online discussions? And I'll give you a moment to answer that. It's not graded.
Well, of course she had some trick questions in here.
Okay. All right, I think everyone has finalized their answers. Okay. All right, we've closed out the poll. So yes, self-grading with rubrics is the only evidence-based practice for asynchronous online discussions that was listed in the poll. And obviously exams are not discussions, and live lectures, especially lengthy ones, are not recommended. And then the video conference breakout rooms are actually synchronous. And then the fisheye teaching phrase there, that is excluding students. So I'm very thankful for your participation, and I'm confident that your students will only benefit from the strategies that you employ from this workshop. And you can try just one or two things out at a time, just like some of you have mentioned, trying out one or two in conjunction with some of the other strategies can be beneficial. So, and also remember the slides will be sent or they'll be uploaded via BlazeVIEW 101, and you have the Google Doc for your reference as well. Once again, thank you. Thank you, Instructor Vaughn and Professor Thomas, for your participation. And that's all the material for the workshop today.
Yes, thanks, guys. We can sit here if you have any remaining questions, but we wanted to make sure we protected your time. So Kay will be emailing you with a feedback form and where to find the materials from today. So good luck with your elevated online discussions and reduced grading. So bye. Yep. See ya.
Bye.
And Kay, you can click the recording think if you press